Jess, you shared something with me that as a parent, I can't unhear. The most dangerous people in the world aren't strangers. They're often in our own family. How did you come to believe this?
I came to believe this through personal experience. So, in the beginning, I thought that I was an anomaly. I thought that I was a very rare circumstance where my father was my abuser. So, all throughout my childhood, I was sexually abused by my father, and on one instance, by my father's father. And yeah, as I said, I thought that I was a rare person until I started speaking up about this on social media and publicly, and started to realize that, wow, it's actually a lot of people all around the world by their own fathers. But then, even taking a step back from that, in Australia, 80 to 90% of childhood sexual abuse cases are by a family member or by a very close family friend. So it's not stranger danger. It's not the people that are out on the street. It's the people that are in your home. It's the people that you're giving, access to your children. So yeah, mine was through personal lived experience that this was happening, and then through sharing and then researching statistics, realizing that, well, this is actually a really big problem that nobody's really speaking about.
When did you first tell somebody or feel the urge to talk about this? What age were you?
So I was threatened quite heavily. I was threatened by my father from as young as I can remember. Around 5 years old, I have a memory of him holding a pillow over my face, suffocating me, just reminding me where he'd bury me in the backyard. And so I was absolutely terrified to tell anybody. And it was reminded to me often that I would be killed if I was to speak up. So the first person that I told was one of his girlfriends when I was around. It's really hard to place ages. I can place like houses, but ages is really difficult. But I would have been somewhere between like maybe 9 to 10 years old. And it was really innocent. I told her in a really innocent way. I told her as in like, me and dad have this secret. I'm not supposed to tell anybody, but I think because you're special, you're allowed to know. So it was really innocent in that I would have already by this point developed multiple personalities. I was later diagnosed with DID. At this point, there was a part of me that was terrified of him, but there was a part of me that loved and adored him. And I was always kind of split between those two. And so the part of me that didn't really understand what it was and how wrong it was the part that kind of told her this secret that he had been touching me. Her reaction was quite intense. She like dropped, we were doing the dishes, she like dropped the dishes and gasped and sort of had a bit of a panic attack, as you would if you found out that your partner was abusing his own children. He came in and threatened me. He came in and said, what's happened? What did she say? And then once she told him what I'd said, he was like, you can't lie about that. It's disgusting. It's wrong. I could go to jail. What the fuck is wrong with you? Tell her right now that you're lying. And I'm just like, whoa, what? Like, what? You can go to jail and what? Like, so confused by the situation. Told her that I was lying, even though I said, like, I was like, but I'm not lying. And he's like, yes, you are. And so I had to tell her I was lying. He sent her home, and then he sexually abused me again that night. So he was quite psychotic. He was just a really twisted person, and nothing happened from that. She didn't tell anybody or do anything about it. He had convinced her that it was a lie. She loved him excessively, and a couple of months later he broke up with her and nothing ever happened.
Why do you think that there's so many parents and people that just instantly don't believe when someone speaks out?
Personally, this is part of the issue. It's a massive, massive issue, and something that is hard to speak about because there's a lot of people that are going to go on the attack. But if you think about it, if it's 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 5 boys being sexually abused, that's what we know. I know from my work that so many women, there's no friendship group that doesn't have a woman that's been sexually abused, if not multiple. I think that the statistics show that 80% of sexual trauma is repressed. So 80% of cases of sexual trauma is repressed, forgotten, suppressed, pushed down, ignored. And so there are people out there, my father's girlfriend included, walking around who either don't know that they have sexual trauma or they're just not willing to deal with it. And because of that inability to deal with it, they just don't have the capacity to confront it when it comes at them. Whether it's in a movie, whether it's in real life, there is actually a physiological thing that can happen in the brain where they forget They see and they unsee. Their brain is only going to receive information that they can handle, that they can cope with, that they can process. And so betrayal trauma theory, developed by Dr. Jennifer Freud, exposed and proved that they can actually have this information spoken to them right in front of them and they can forget it. And this comes from mums not having addressed, or parents, but mostly mums, not having addressed their own sexual trauma, not being able to cope with it or deal with it, to the point when their kids bring it to them, they can't even deal with it themselves. Their inner child's activated. They're so overwhelmed by the situation that they go, that's probably not what happened, sweetie. Or that's probably, or you know, they just unsee it. They unsee it, they invalidate it, and they continue this generational cycle of trauma. So it's coming back to, and I know that this girlfriend, because I reached out to her in later years to say, hey, do you remember me ever saying something to you? And she did. And she said, you know, I've had my own sexual trauma, and, you know, I know how scary it can be. And, but I wasn't sure. And I haven't thought about that in a long time. And yeah, there was a lot going on there that she hadn't dealt with. And so I could very clearly see from that personal example, but also now from my clients and their mothers and reactions that I'm hearing, and I'm receiving DMs all the time from people saying, I told my mum and this is what she said. And it's coming from their inability to deal with their own shame, their own sexual experiences, their own sexual abuse. They just can't deal with it. And that's not to say that they're bad people. Some of them, they're questionable, but it's not to say that they're bad people. It's just that they just don't know how. They don't have the tools, they don't have the capacity. And when that trauma response is activated, their logical brain goes offline. Their processing goes offline. They're triggered. They're in a completely different state than they would be normally. So all of a sudden their response is not going to be the best response for that child. And they're going to then, if they have a history of dissociative amnesia, of checking out, of losing chunks of time, they're going to be able to push that into that same place and forget that the child even confided anything in them. And it's a very real thing that's happening.
Okay, so before we go back into your story and hearing your story, and I know you must be so over talking about it because you've been all over the media, all over in so many podcasts lately, but I know it's a really incredible story. It's so hurtful, but I can't help but say to you, it's so incredible that you're sharing this, because no one speaks about this. And I think people like you who are willing to be brave enough to say, yeah, this is what happened and this is what I'm actually doing about it. And this is how, when, you know, I always follow this like mantra in my mind that when a woman is authentic in herself, it gives permission for other women to be authentic in themselves. And I think now, as mums, I was talking to my partner about this last night, as mums, we bear the responsibility of being the backbone of our children. And dads don't have it like we do. Like, the kids need us. They need our nervous system. They need everything. Like, and I feel like sometimes I'm crazy. Like, I was talking to my partner about this last night. Like, I know that I look crazy because whenever something comes up in life, I'm like, I need to do a course on this. I need to learn. I need to read a book. I need support. I need to like overcome this. I need to learn it. And I just like, where like the minority just is like, oh, that's just a normal part of parenting. You yell, you get angry. And I'm like, no, I want to be better. Like, let's learn how to become better. Like, let's change. So thank you so much. Before we go back into your journey, because I know a lot of listeners haven't heard of you before, or heard of your journey. So I really want to hear that. But first, whilst we're on the hot topic of mums, and if a child has presented to a parent or a caregiver or a friend or whatever, how should we respond and how shouldn't we respond?
The natural response as a protector of a child is to become defensive, is to meet them with what and who and when, and I'm calling the police and we're going to the police station, and to act with anger and rage, because you would be angry, you would be enraged, and that is a normal response. But it's not what's best for the child, because I know as a child that there's no way, like there's a fear of repercussions, there's a fear of the reaction, there's a fear of the response, and there's a way that you can get more information out of that child in order to help and heal them. But getting enraged and becoming reactive, emotional, crying, making it about you, essentially, it's going to cause that child to withdraw, shut down, pull back in, and just lock up tight. So obviously, this is easier said than done, but if your child says something along these lines, you need to be able to regulate. So whether there's another adult that can sit with them for a moment while you go to the bathroom and cry and scream into a pillow and let those emotions out, take some deep breaths and come back, or whether you just say directly to the child, this is awful and I'm so sorry that this has happened to you. I feel, you know, as your mum or whatever, I feel like heartbroken for you, and I'm just going to take 1 second and I'm going to come back to the conversation. I know that it could feel counterintuitive to leave the child, but if you can't compose yourself and be regulated and be there for them, then you've just got to do it. So the first step is regulating yourself, taking some deep breaths, letting those emotions out, centering yourself so that you can come back to give the child what they need. And what they need is you're safe. What they need is you're loved. I will protect you now. This person is never going to hurt you again. This is not your fault. This is that the disgusting feeling that you're feeling is not yours. That's theirs and they've given it to you, but it's not yours. You can give that back. You can let that go. It's not you. You didn't do anything wrong and it's not your fault is so important for them to know. And letting them guide the next steps. Because if you say, get in the car, we're going to the police station, we're making a statement. As I learned from interviewing Kristen V, which I think you've interviewed her too, as I learned from interviewing her, 0.03% of cases actually get convictions in childhood sexual abuse cases because children are afraid to report, because children are, you know, they're saying something and then they're kind of retracting it because they're freaking out, and there's so many obstacles there in that situation that, yes, you may want the conviction, but that's not what's best for the child right now in this moment. What's best for the child is that they feel safe and loved and protected. So having a cuddle with them, asking them, what would you like to do now? Like, would you like to talk more about this? Or did you want to talk more about it another day and just watch your favorite movie? Did you want to make some popcorn and have a cuddle on the couch? Like, what do they need right now in that moment to feel safe and protected? Thanking them for telling you. Thank you so much for telling me. Thank you for confiding that in me, because it's building trust. It's building this respect and this, like, I appreciate you telling me. So these are all the sorts of narratives that the words that I would be saying to this child in order for them to feel safe, loved, and protected. Because at the end of the day, our perception of justice and our perception of action is that we go to the police station and we take that person to court and they go to jail. Not necessarily the best thing for the child, especially depending on who the person is that's abusing them. What they need is to be protected from the person. They need to feel safe. They need to release that shame, and they need to know that they are unconditionally loved. If you're wanting the best outcome for your child's life, that's what you need to be doing in that moment, focusing on counseling and therapy or art therapy, spending extra quality time with them, like making sure that this isn't affecting them in the long term before you even think about those other sort of avenues, which in my opinion personally are just a fucking waste of time at this point in time. It's getting better. I actually got sent an article from my sister yesterday for a father-daughter case in New South Wales that just got a really good conviction. First one I've seen. So it is changing, but at the moment, the priority needs to be child first. What do they need? How are we going to sit with them in this and help them heal through this so that it doesn't affect the rest of their life? And when I think about trauma and what I teach about trauma is that the key sort of elements that make something traumatic versus not traumatic is that we're holding it alone. There's an overwhelming amount of emotion and there's an overwhelming amount of confusion. So there's a loneliness, there's a confusion that you can help them in that moment. Once they've confided, you can help them say, you know, if you need to cry, cry. Like, allow them to let the emotions out and say to them, you know, I would even go as far, obviously I'm qualified to do this, but I would even go as far as to say, like, what did you want to do in that moment? Like, did you want to run? Did you want to kick them? Did you want to punch them? Like, what did you want to do? And asking them what they wanted to do. And if they wanted to run, say, do you want to go for a little run right now? That's somatic healing. So what can we do to help them to move the emotions, to get the feelings that they didn't get to do? And can we get a punching bag and get them to punch the punching bag? Or what can we do to help them to move it through and understand what was happening? So this is the thing as well. Can you tell I'm passionate? I'm like, okay, let's get right in here. This is the thing as well, is that people don't realize that confusion is what makes something traumatic. And what happens is when the child doesn't have an alternate explanation for what happened, or they don't have an explanation for what's happened to them. They make up their own conclusions. And the conclusions that they make is, this feels wrong and disgusting, so I'm wrong and disgusting. And so if you actually explain to the child, okay, this is probably not a conversation that you want to have, but if you say to the child, okay, so this is what sex is and this is what touch is, and some people's brains, I would say to my children, some people's brains don't work right. And instead of being attracted to people, their boyfriends and girlfriends and their partners, they're attracted to little children, which is not right. And it's not your fault, it's their fault. It's something wrong in their brain that they need to fix. And it's got nothing to do with you that this happened to you, but this is what's happened. They've touched you and they've made you feel uncomfortable for their own, their own gratification. And so the other thing that I would be saying, especially if it's somebody that the child loves, is that that's not love. And that's not what people who love you do to you, because the child can confuse abuse and love.
I saw you share something recently. It was about what age does it actually come out? Because right now we're speaking to children if they would have come to you. But like you mentioned, a lot of children suppress it and they go in, it goes into a part of their brain that they actually can't access. And you shared something about like it's not until they hit their 30s.
Christy mentioned it on
Yeah.
my podcast when I interviewed her. Yeah, women, it was something like 20, 22, 25 years or something, and men it was 30 plus, but it was like 90% of men never.
Never, never
Never.
share.
I think there's two elements to it. There's people who remember that consciously suppress it, that push it down with force, that remember it and go, oh, I don't want to think about that. And then there's people who are actually completely unconscious to the fact that they have a memory there. Like, it is literally in their unconscious. So if you were to outwardly say to them, have you been sexually abused? They'd say no. That would have been me 5, 6 years ago. Like, they'd say, no, I don't think so. They might have a feeling that something's happened, but they can't place it. But there is so many people out there that have no understanding or no recollection of the abuse at all.
What do you think is going to be like the downside of not being real and authentic with yourself and then getting healing in that?
I think the downside of, do you mean of not remembering?
Not bringing it up, like not talking about, not getting out of your body.
Yeah, yeah. I think, yeah, a lot of people think that if you just ignore it, it will go away. But the reality is, if you ignore it, it'll build and it will build. And that every time, if your perception, if your belief systems, which are created from moments or traumas, are creating your reality, are creating your perception of reality, then if you're holding down a lot of shame and there's a lot of traumatic memories there that have literally created an identity around shame, you're going to continue to experience and feel shame every single day. You'll feel ashamed of the smallest little mistakes that you're making at work, or the one comment that you said to one of the mums at school. That's the feeling that you continue to feel because it's what's inside of you and it's what's being generated by your beliefs, which come from your memories. Hopefully people can follow that trail. But what's happening is it's just building. And I see time and time again women in their 30s coming to me saying, I was fine, and then all of a sudden I was not fine. And it's like, you actually weren't fine. You were running and you were coping, like basically living in fight or flight, and you've hit a level of burnout, and now you're having to feel and experience everything that you've been pushing down. So you can't escape it. Like, you might think that you're escaping it, you might think that you're dealing with it, but then you go into a conversation with one of these women and they're like, oh yeah, I hate having sex is awful, I only do it because I have to, and I don't self pleasure, and I don't enjoy life, and I can't rest, I can't take time for myself, I'm a mum, I'm too busy. And they've got all of these coping mechanisms and things that they're like, they think they're fine, but actually they're just existing in survival. They're miserable, they're not alive, they're not like passionate and living with like joy and love and an overflow of, positivity and gratitude. Like, they're just existing. And
Okay.
so
What's the first step?
first step is, honestly, is being brave, because I've always been, I think you mentioned earlier, like I've always been the person that wants the answers to everything. I'm a truth teller, and I want to figure things out. Like if there's something I don't know, I want to figure out where it's coming from and why it's happening and how I can fix it and how it ties in. And a lot of people aren't that way naturally. And so it takes a lot of bravery for those people to say, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this work. And it's called the healing work for a reason. It's not called like the healing relaxation or the healing retreat or like rest time. Like it's the work because it's hard. And I acknowledge that, but it's a short term pain. It's a short term period where you're doing the healing work to come out the other side so much better, but it takes bravery. So working on being brave, on being able to just do the hard thing and step into it is the first step. Like a lot of people don't have awareness that they're suffering until something happens and they go, holy shit, actually I am suffering. I have been suffering. I'm not living my best life. And that's the catalyst. But the next barrier there is that bravery. Like it's no one's going to do it for you. Nobody is going to do it for you. Nobody's just going to come and wave a magic wand or do the work for you. You actually have to be brave and book the appointment, book the session and do it yourself. So for me, this is why I created the online clinic. This is why I have been training therapists within an inch of their life to understand complex trauma, to understand sexual trauma, to understand personality disorders, to understand how to heal these things at the deepest level possible. Because the reality is people go to a psychologist and they talk about it. But to me, that's mowing the grass. To me, that's not ripping out any roots. And every week you're mowing the grass and you're feeling a bit better because there is a release that happens when you speak words. But it's not the same as actually getting to the root cause of why those emotions and thoughts and patterns keep coming to the surface. You actually have to get to the root of the suffering. And so this is, as I said, why I created the online clinic and why we do this one-on-one deeper level work where we process the memories, we shift the subconscious beliefs. This is where people need to be healing. They need to heal all those traumatic memories. And I'm not talking just extreme abuse and trauma like I have been through. I'm talking about the one nasty, shitty little girl at school that said that you're ugly or said that you couldn't play with them. Like those things stay with you and they're unprocessed because as a child you couldn't understand them. And so they need to be processed correctly. They need to be, I always call a traumatic memory like an open memory. It's like an open wound. It needs to be closed off. It needs to be healed so that it can be moved into the past. It can be, this is something that happened back then and it's not affecting me now. We need to process those memories. We need to remove the subconscious beliefs. So the things that we decided about ourselves or the world as a result of that thing that happened. Therefore, that little girl might have believed I am ugly and she lives the rest of her goddamn life truly believing that she's ugly. She could be the most beautiful person in the world and she could not see it. So we have to heal the memory. Then we have to remove and replace the subconscious beliefs in the subconscious mind when you are in the correct brainwave, which is a deep theta brainwave. It's not a beta brainwave, which is the brainwave that you're normally in when you're in any other type of talk therapy. You have to go into that deep brainwave. And then we go through a somatic release process. So we have to feel the emotions that we didn't feel, like hurt or pains, whatever type of pain or suffering it is, anger. It might be that I've worked with men who didn't stand up for themselves and want to go back in and fight and take that power back. So we have to be having that somatic release. We have to be having this like a new visual experience. And basically what it is in the brain is retrieving the memories and recoding them with a new nervous system imprint, a new subconscious belief, and a new emotion, a new feeling. So we release the sadness, we release the anger, we release the hurt, and then we take that child somewhere and we make them feel safe and loved and whatever other emotions, happy, excited. And then when the person recalls that memory, they recall it with those feelings. They recall it with a new nervous system response and with a new belief system. So that's kind of like the full circle that took me freaking 15 years to figure out.
Yeah, wow. It's making me think about, I just started doing this aware parenting course because I'm noticing how triggering I am being when my 3-year-old is showing big emotions. and I notice how triggered I am. So there's this lady called Marion Rose, and she has a podcast which I've listened to quite a lot of, and now I just dove into her course. And one of the things she mentioned in module 2 this morning is that children need 3 things. The first is security and love. And the second thing is they need to relive traumatic events and release it from their body. So I've always wondered, I'm like, when we go to the park and we play with all our friends, my daughter has always been super independent. And I guess from the disconnected domination culture, which is the whole culture that we've been raised in, and that's a Marion Rose phrase, is that the independent kid are the best kids, right? Like they sleep in their own room, they look after themselves, they don't have big feelings, they don't have tantrums, they don't take up space in the world, right? So now I'm starting to realize the effects that's having on us adults of being disconnected from our own feelings, being confused on how we feel. We don't know because we've been told to shut up, like you're too much, or it was your fault, the blame, the shame, all of that. So what she mentioned this morning is that children need to relive. So what I can't help but to hear when you're saying this to me right now is that in the park, my daughter would be always, there was never any tantrums. Like she was always the quote unquote best behaved, and she's only 3, so I'm only at the beginning of the motherhood journey. But then what would happen is we'd get in the car and she would scream the whole way home. And I'd be like, what the fuck is wrong with her? Every time we go anywhere, she's been fine. And then the whole 30-minute drive home, she's crying. Now realizing she was experiencing her own micro traumas, like she might have been pushed or hit or shoved or saw a kid being upset. And she was just basically telling me on the drive home, like, Mum, this little girl was upset, or she hit me and she hurt me and I'm feeling this way. And I'm shutting off from it because that's just how we've been. That's whole of the world. That's what we do, right? Like with our kids. So anyway, in this module 2, and she said that about like these kids are feeling micro traumas, and then obviously they need to relive that trauma if they've suppressed it in the moment because they need to feel safe. And I've gone, why is it that she always is with me? She is sooky or whingy or big cry. And people keep saying, oh, it's like, that means they feel safe with their mum. But I'm going, oh my goodness, like it's a lot. It's a lot to hold, but trying to become aware of it. I can't help but hear that basically what you're saying is kind of the same. Like if we're not actually letting our kids feel safe with us in any of their emotion, the good and the bad, quote unquote, like where the Marion Rose, she tries to teach you that every feeling is a safe place. So the happy, the joy, the fun, and also the sad, the overwhelmed, the frustrated, the angry, it should all be welcomed with open arms, basically. However, I'm finding it really hard to do, but I can't help but what you're saying is if we don't start from babies, holding that safe space for our babies in those early years, then they're really going to suppress, aren't they? And then it's going to show up in adulthood, or they're not going to come to us and show us those feelings.
Yeah, absolutely. It does. It starts there. And it also, if you think about it in terms of the creation of trauma, being that confusion, being that heightened emotion as well, it's the more comfortable that they can become expressing their emotions and not being afraid of their emotions. Because honestly, to me, I believe that all human suffering comes back to an emotion. Really, all human suffering is emotions. Like, it's not the thoughts about what's happened, it's the feeling that's paired with it. We're so afraid of our feelings that we drink, that we take drugs, that we do anything that we can to numb, distract, avoid. We swipe, we online shop, we get addicted to porn, we do anything we can. And these are all behaviors that people are like, oh, you shouldn't do this. But really, at the end of the day, what every single person is avoiding is a feeling. And at the end of the day, a feeling is just it's an emotion, it's an energy, it's a feeling. It can't actually hurt you. And so if children were taught this from a young age and they get to the point where they're like, oh, there's some sadness there, I'm going to cry and I'm going to release it. I literally wrote my kids a book. I made it on Vistaprint, and it was like the context of it was like emotions aren't scary. They're just feelings inside your body. They're just energy. And once you feel them, the energy moves and soon you'll be feeling lighter, but you have to feel them, otherwise they're stored. And I created like little visuals to go with it and stuff. But I've been teaching them that since they were like 3. And to the point of, now my youngest will say to me, only 2 days ago, he was sitting down on his beanbag and he said, Mum, I feel sad. And I said, that's okay, buddy. Like, sadness is a normal emotion. And do you know what you feel sad about? No, I don't know. I just feel sad. And then I talked to him for a bit more. I went and had a shower. And then he came into me and he said, I just feel really sad. I just feel like I want to cry. And I said, like, do you want a hug when I get out of the shower? And he said, I just don't know why I'm feeling it though. And I said, why don't you go into your room and lay down and put your hands on your heart and ask your heart why it feels sad? Because our heart has an intelligence, our body has an intelligence. And so close your eyes. And the act of closing your eyes just brings it inward because he's trying to figure it out with his brain. And when he actually brings his attention inward, he's going to know what it is. So I said, go lay down, close your eyes. And he literally laid down, came back in like 20 seconds later and said, I know what it is. I got yelled at in this certain situation and I got a bit scared and it made me feel really sad. And I was like, no, buddy. And he got a little bit teary. I got out of the shower, gave him a hug and said, you didn't deserve to be yelled at like that. You didn't do anything to deserve that. That's that person's anger. And they were letting all that anger out onto you, but you didn't deserve it. So let's get rid of it. Let's just imagine that you're sending it back. Take a deep breath. And then he was happy as Larry for the rest of the day. And it's just, they just need this reaffirmation of you didn't deserve it. Wasn't your fault. Let's give it back. Let's feel it. Got some tears out, got to say what he wanted to say, got the hug, got the love, and then he was fine. And those micro moments add up, as you were saying, like from birth, like they really start to add up. And I even find this as someone who's done the deep level of work. I still, through certain interactions, maybe one day I'll wake up to an onslaught of awful DMs or everything is energy and you're constantly absorbing information and emotions that it's even when you're quote unquote healed, you're still going to have human emotions. So not being afraid of them and teaching children not to be afraid of them is the most important thing that we can teach them because we're teaching them how to essentially not suffer. They're still going to feel the emotions and so to some degree suffer, but they're not going to hold on to it. They're not going to push it down and then have it build over decades. They're going to feel it temporarily and know how to move through it and move on. And yeah, I think it's the concept for the next book, the next children's book, that because I was like, okay, we've written like the education and now it's like, okay, how do we what's the problem? And the problem with trauma is the feeling. And so if we can teach children from a young age that exactly how to be with the feeling, how to not be afraid of the feelings, then we can eliminate so much suffering.
Yeah, I love that. Can we let everybody know just an overview of your story and then how you came to telling your mum? And I guess the biggest question everybody's going to have is how didn't she know? So can we go over that?
Yeah, it's the most asked question on social media beyond that and is your dad in jail? So starting with my mum or starting with the story?
Let's go with your story about your dad, just your overhaul childhood and the house dynamic where their siblings, how he was doing this with no one knowing.
I started my first memory of sexual abuse from my father was around 3 years old. And he was still with my mum at that point. I don't know where she was that day, but I know that she wasn't in the house. He was outside mowing the lawns, came inside, and then abused me. And so he obviously was opportunistic. It was times when he had me alone that he was doing it. And I have hundreds of memories from 3 years old ranging through till around 12 years old. When I was around 7, so these were like sexual acts, making me do sexual acts to him and receiving as well, and him doing them to me quite frequently. As I mentioned, there was death threats around if I was to tell anybody, lots of threats. And what I kind of learned over my childhood was that love was abuse, because when my dad wasn't sexually abusing me and we were having our like special time, he would be cruel. He would be critical. Like he was a tormentor as well. Like I remember I was just saying, and such a random example, but I was just saying the other day I was probably like 9 or 10 years old. And I was telling my partner this. I haven't ever said this because it feels like such a small example, but I woke up in the morning and he came into my room and he was like, oh, honey, I made you breakfast in bed. I made you pancakes. And I was like, oh, what? Like just, waking up and thinking this is so nice, like so loving, like so unlike him. And so I like sleepily sort of sat up, and he put the plate in front of me, and there was a huntsman, like a huge huntsman spider on the plate. And I'm terrified of spiders, obviously. No one wants that in bed. But just things like that, he would just do things to make you think he was going to be loving and then to torture you or to terrify you. He was very twisted. And so he was that way because of his father. So my grandfather, I didn't spend a lot of time with him. Him and my dad were in and out of contact a lot. They were, yeah, he would cut him out of his life and then bring him back into his life. But on one of the occasions when he did have him back in his life, when I was around 7 years old, I had a sleepover. I called him Opa. He was Hungarian. And I had a sleepover at his house. And that night, that afternoon, my sister told me that she was really afraid that my Opa was going to come into her room and do something to her and touch her. So obviously it had happened before. I knew exactly what it meant because it had been happening to me from my father. And being an older sister, I was absolutely terrified. So that night when we went to bed, I was laying in the room and I heard her door open, and I knew that it was him. And I almost went into like this hypnotic state where I was like, I just needed to get him out of there. I needed to protect my sister. So I just started screaming at the top of my lungs, Opa, 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 Opa. Like, just, I didn't know what else to do. So I just kept yelling his name until he came into the room and was like, what's wrong? And then I couldn't say anything. I just was like, like I froze. I couldn't say anything. And he looked at me and said, you stupid girl, and undid his belt. And that night he raped me. And that was how I lost my virginity at 7 years old. So that was probably one of the, yeah, it's pretty gruesome, pretty intense. And then when I was around 13, I don't know why, but I told my dad. I think maybe my Upa had like come back into our life and I didn't want that. So I told my dad what he'd done when I was 7. And my dad obviously confronted him, but somewhere along the lines, my Upa had convinced my dad that if I was telling my dad, who else was I telling? And that when they needed to, lock that down. My Upa had already been to jail in 1965 for child rape. He'd raped a child when he was in his early 20s in Holland, and it had caught up with him and he went to an Australian jail. Yeah, they decided that they needed to silence me. So when I was around 13, there was a day that I've only spoken about once. You might have seen the clips on social media, but they got together and basically tortured me, like almost unimaginable. Like, it really took me a long time to come to terms with the fact that I actually went through that, like sadistic torture, like, yeah, really, really sadistic stuff, like waterboarding and inserting things and stepping on my neck, holding me down, like just punching me in the stomach, like just, yeah, awful, awful things. Yeah. And then when it kind of stopped. I had a bit of a rocky teen years, as you would, holding down that much trauma. And then when I was around 19, I still had my dad in my life, and I hadn't been abused for a long time. I think there's always been a part of me, not now, but that just wanted him to love me so desperately. Just had never received it the way that I wanted to, and just was always, I'm a very optimistic and hopeful person even now. I always try to see the best. So I went to his house and I had a dinner with him and my brother and sister, and my brother and sister left, and he'd said, why don't you stay and watch a movie? And I remember this like sinking feeling of like, oh, probably shouldn't be alone with him, but also it'll be fine. Like, he just wants to watch a movie. Like, my dad wants to watch a movie with me. And so I watched the movie, and then after that I went to leave, and he's like, just stay the night. It's super late now. Just stay there. There's so many beds in the house. You can stay. There's no one here. And I felt like I couldn't leave. I could have, but I felt like I couldn't. It was just this freeze response. And so I stayed the night and I laid in bed, and I didn't sleep for the first couple of hours. I was in fight or flight, obviously. At the time, I didn't really realize that's what was happening. I just thought I couldn't sleep. And then at around midnight, I heard the door opening, and I just knew what was happening, and my whole body froze. And that was probably one of the worst experiences, because I was older and I couldn't move, and I knew what sex was, and I knew that this was rape, and I knew that it was wrong, and I knew that it was disgusting. And the next day having to go like to the chemist and get a morning after test, like a morning after pill, because I didn't. And I took all that shame, and this is how I know that we take that shame on, in order to protect myself and preserve the relationship with my father, because there was no way I could cut him out. I was terrified of him. So in order to preserve that, I just decided that I was disgusting. there was this feeling of like, if anyone knows that I had sex, even though I didn't, I was raped. But if anyone knows that that happened, like I'll lose everyone in my life. And so I just internalized all that shame, internalized all the disgust, and made it mean something about me instead of about him. And it took a while for me to kind of reprogram that. But that's basically, I mean, there was bullying. I was bullied in school. I was a very strange child because I was just like, I blinked all the time and I was licking and drying my lip and I was like twitchy and nervous and, you know, just holding down a stupid amount of trauma every day. So that was like a stacking effect of like being bullied at school and then coming home. And my mum, bless her, is a very kind woman. She's a very kind woman, would not hurt a fly, but a little bit dissociated, a little bit checked out. And she was like that throughout childhood. Like it was very much a children are sort of seen and not heard, go away, play in the other room, leave us alone, parents' room, children's room, like kind of very, there was a disconnect there. There wasn't like a really close relationship with open communication or anything like that, just very isolated. So there was not really any safe place at her house. It was kind of like deal with it yourself. And then at school there was bullying, at my dad's there was abuse. So I didn't have a safe person.
There's so many people listening to this right now will be able to resonate. So how did you build up the courage to talk to your mum?
So I told my mum 5 years ago when I was 30. I told her when I remembered. So the weird thing about this type of trauma, when I say remembered, I had flashbacks of it all throughout my teens and 20s. But I'd found a way, obviously, with the personality disorder and things like that, to kind of compartmentalize. And when I would have flashbacks of the trauma, I would say, "You're disgusting for thinking about that." I would blink really hard and I would kind of push it back down so that I never had to like consciously acknowledge it. When I finally consciously acknowledged it and realized that it wasn't about me and that my dad was a predator, I told my mum, and her response was straight away, "I believe you." She said, "This is shocking. This is like absolutely shocking. And I find it so hard to believe that I missed that and that he could actually do something that sick. But I 100% believe you." She was very clear in saying that, like, this has shocked me and it's not something that I would ever have thought. But I want you to know that, like, I know you wouldn't make that up. And it was the same when I told my brother and sister as well. My brother, like, later came forward that it happened to him too. And my sister, I mean, obviously we know that my opa had, but she again has everything like very locked down. She's trying to uncover it at the moment. But yeah, my mum was like, "I believe you. I'm here for you." She's been here for me all the way through. Like anything I need, she's there. She's afraid for me a lot. She has her own background with my father of some horrific domestic abuse, and so she left when I was 5 or 6, and yeah, she's quite terrified of him still to this day. And so she's a little bit, every time I speak or share another memory or another layer of trauma, or like, you know, get the courage to speak to another part, she's like, oh, like she's terrified for me that he's going to do something, that he's going to come after me, because he is still out there and doesn't live too far from me. But yeah, she's terrified for me, but she's supportive. She believes and she's supportive, and she's always like, "I support anything that you need to do to heal." And I think she's starting to understand now my mission, because a lot of people have said to me, like, "Why do you speak about this? Like, you've healed from it. Like, you could just go and live a beautiful, blissful life and not have to talk about it." But she understands now, like, my passion in wanting to help other people. And yeah, definitely feeling not obligated, but definitely drawn to just knowing that there's no one else out there. I think when I first started trying to heal from it, I was on Google and like Reddit and like looking for books, like books on father-daughter sexual abuse, like, you know, yeah, Google, like I was everywhere. I was trying to figure out, how do you heal from this? And sorry, I felt that coming. And there was nothing, like nothing. There was some really terrible information from survivors also looking for help, saying, "I found nothing. It's not possible. You just learn to live with it." Everyone's saying, "I've got DID, I've got CPTSD, I've got all these things and no solutions." And so I made this commitment for, if I get through this, because at the time I was heavily suicidal, if I get through this, I'm gonna share my story, and it's gonna help other people to release the shame. Because no one, everyone's too afraid to talk about it because it's so wrong and so disgusting and for so many reasons. And so yeah, I made that decision that if I made it through, that I would, I think I wrote it in a journal, something like, if I make it through, I'm going to come back for them and I'm going to share for them and help them and give them the tools and give them everything that I wish I had back then.
Wow.
It's a
Thank
lot.
you. Because, like I just said before, like women who are brave enough to be authentic, be in their power, be in their truth, regardless of how they're going to look, because um, people that speak out about anything, if you're the whistleblower, if you're the middleman, being like, hey, I don't agree with this, you're the one that looks crazy to the minority. So thank you from all of us, because it doesn't have to be about, obviously your case is quite the most traumatic, I guess, if we're going to put on a scale, like the most traumatic, where what Christy was speaking about the other day, like this can be cousins, this can be kids at sleepovers, this can be the micro traumas in that too. And from me, I'm reading in between the lines that we can protect our kids and from this in the greatest sense, but also how can we protect our kids from those micro traumas in the sleepovers, being bullied at school, how just as mums we can, because I do believe as mums there's a huge responsibility on our shoulders to be the primary, I'm going to say the first thing that comes to mind is like the nervous system regulator. Like
Yeah,
we need our mums.
absolutely. And obviously, some people don't have safe mums as well, which is a whole other wound. But yeah, like for the mums that are listening, the mums that care, the mums that want to help, the children absolutely need their mums. They need that care. They need that, the love, the support. Like mums are made to nurture and they need that nurturing love. And I think we're being taught that, you know, the independence, like you said, independence, make them do it themselves, like just kind of this detachment, even with things like co-sleeping, with like all the messages that are out there are like detach early so that they can become independent, whereas the reality is they need attachment, they need secure attachment in order to learn secure attachment later on in life. So secure attachment, love, like being there for them, meeting their needs, like allowing them to have a certain of independence or, you know, a level of control over what happens to their body, obviously, but to their lives, to their day, like allowing them that, but also giving them this like supportive network and this like supportive framework around it is so important. And I've met people who have been bullied in school and they're highly suicidal. They have a lot of mental health issues, a lot of like, there definitely is like a scale of trauma. And there's people that come to me who've had constant, ongoing, complex abuse of sadistic, intense natures. And obviously, yes, those people have personality disorders and PTSD, and they've got a huge level of suffering that they've got to work through. But there is also this other category of people that think, oh, not even that much happened to me and I'm suffering so much. But they don't even realize that those, as I said before, those incidences that have happened have created this like framework for how they experience life. And it's just a stacking effect. And they're just getting heavy and tired. And so working with our children to allow them to know how to release that is so essential.
How do you feel as a mum being able to hold space from your kids while you're still navigating all of this?
At the moment, like now, I feel like it's fine. I'm very rarely triggered and most of the time happy, most of the time living pretty good life. I think when I first started healing for those first 2 or 3 years, it was so fucked up. Honestly, I was suicidal. I was in a dark hole and nothing mattered. And even my kids at that point didn't matter, which is really hard to say. But people always think that those sorts of things will pull you out. What about your kids? You know, they say, what about your children? And it's like, who? What? Like, what do you mean? Like, there's nothing. There is no hope. There is no emotion. There is just darkness. And it was really hard to, and, you know, my mum and all of my family say, like, you wouldn't have known that. Like, I still showed up for my kids as a gentle parent, as a kind parent. I've always had this, like, I'm not going to pass my trauma onto them. So I was still writing them the books and doing all the things with them. But then I would go to bed at night and think about killing myself, or like, you know, I was able to do both, but it wasn't easy. And I do think like I was dissociated a lot of the time. So there was a lot of times that I didn't have the energy to play with them the way that I wanted to go out and do the things. But now that my boys are 7 and 9, like the last 2, 3 years, like I've actually been like so much more engaged because of knowing of that around that time that I missed out as well, where they were quite little. And again, I didn't miss out. Like, you only have to have been following me on social media for the last 5 years to know that I was always out doing things with them. But yeah, I think it was really hard. And a lot of mums I find say like, oh, when the kids are older, I'll start my healing work. But the reality is the earlier you start, the earlier they benefit, because even if you're a little bit dysregulated the day that you have your healing session or whatever, 2 days later, you're going to be an entirely new person. You're going to be thinking differently, speaking differently, and that's going to impact them. And I think mums think that focusing on themselves and healing themselves is selfish, whereas I would say that it's like the greatest act of love for your children, because you're modeling a new experience, and our children take us as their models. So if you're reactive and angry and miserable and you hate your job and you hate where you are in life, the children think that that's what an adult looks like. And so if you start doing this healing work and all of a sudden you're happy and you're full of life and you're chasing your passions, they're like, okay, that's what you do as an adult. So you're actually, by healing yourself, healing your children. Like, and that if you can't do it for yourself in the beginning, that's fine. Do it for them.
So this podcast is going to get released the week after Christy, so it's going to be 2 weeks of heavy realness, but good realness. Like, this is the shit that we need to be having conversations about. We need to be listening. We need to be real about that. It's all around us. So let's go to tools. How can we as parents protect our kids, and when should we start?
We should start immediately. We should start from birth. I think there is a time and place where children aren't going to understand the concepts, especially around sexual abuse of these sorts of things. So I think for us, like my mum and my sister and I have written a children's book called SOS Secret or Surprise. And this is educating children about like, nobody should ever touch your private parts or make you touch theirs. Nobody should ever make you keep things a secret if they're making you feel alone or isolated or scared or sick in the tummy. Like, we go into feelings and what feelings you should never hold alone, and how to be brave, how to tell a safe person. So we've written that book from my lens of what I needed, and from then like kind of making that more palatable for the general public as well, because my experiences are quite intense. But we've also framed it from the angle of most abuse does come from within the family. So there is context in there of sometimes the person hurting you might also be somebody that you love, which can be really confusing. And it's like, telling somebody isn't about getting them into trouble, it's about keeping you safe. And we kind of introduced this concept of like, that it could be family members without kind of like trying to destroy the family structure and trust in family. So we've apparently we've got amazing feedback. We think we did really well, but we've got a lot of feedback from mums saying that we've just handled it with such finesse and that we've nailed it. So that's definitely one tool, the book. With everything that's happened in the world in the last 48 hours, we actually sold out very quickly. So we're waiting on our next shipment. But yeah, I think that book is aimed around 4 years old, because pre that, those conversations are a little bit not gonna land. But pre 4 years old, and pre actually explicitly saying to children, you shouldn't be touched, you shouldn't be made to touch, these are your private parts, nobody should put anything into your mouth, your vagina, your bum. Like, these are the things that shouldn't be happening, and nobody should be making you touch any of those parts or put anything into those parts. And I think that you can do that from 3 or 2, where you're like, that's, using different language, like, that's yours, that's just for you, that's your private part. And just getting them to understand that concept, but also their body. So, no means no. And when they don't want to be touched, allowing like that to be respected. So not forcing them to hug people. I see so many people with like their 2-year-olds or even like 1.5-year-olds saying like, oh, give Uncle so-and-so a hug. And the child's terrified and they're like, go on, give him a hug. And they're so fucking worried about what Uncle so-and-so is going to think, that they're not realizing that the child has an intuition, and the child needs to have like bodily autonomy from this age. So there's another book, I think it's called My Underpants Rule. There's so many books out there. I can get together a little list, but books definitely A lot of them though are around that sort of 4 years old age. So pre that, I wouldn't be having the conversation with my children depending on where they're at. Before that age, I would be more having conversations around that's your private parts and identifying what the private parts are, what private means, and then also just those body boundaries of like if they don't want to hug somebody or they don't want to even give you a hug that day, that's fine. It's their body. They get to do what they want with their body. So instilling that from a young age is also going to then create this foundation for when you start introducing the concepts of the book and of the more detail.
I found learning how to talk to kids so hard. Like, I haven't been around kids for, I was around kids heaps in my childhood, and then then obviously you go to high school and you're not really around kids. And then my best friend who had a kid first, like, she was in a different state than I had mine. And now that she's coming older, I'm like, how do you speak to her? And I find myself in the moment, I've been like, okay, I know I need to talk to her about no one touches your vagina. But in my mind, I'm like, I don't know how to say it to a child because I speak
Yeah.
like an adult. And then I freeze. And then I'm like, but you, and Christy explained it really well, but I still find in the moment, I know in my head, it's like the pre-programming and the subconscious just wants to run and talk as you would from me to you. Um, and I'm quite a very like to the point, abrupt person. So trying to like soften. And in the moment, you're like, okay, I know, I read somewhere or I know I heard somewhere. This is how you say it. But in the moment, I'm like, I forget.
Yeah, I'd print it out on like a piece of paper and have it
Okay,
somewhere.
good idea.
Yeah,
Okay.
like a little script, like on your fridge on a magnet or something. And when it happens, just quickly read it and then go back and having something along the lines of like, yeah, like even with your vagina, like your vagina is just a private part for you. It's just for you. And you know, a conversation with a girl is different to a conversation with a boy. Like I've and depending on like siblings and things like that, like I'm constantly having to have the conversation with my two boys of like stop, like put it away, like no, it's just yours, it's just for you, and like stop making jokes about your balls. And you know, boys are definitely a whole different ball game. But if I ever have another baby and I have a girl, like I'd be teaching her that, like, you know, from probably more around like the 5, 6, 7 year old age, but like I'd be talking to her about like it does feel really good. You'll notice that it feels, or even when they're touching it. So like girls can start touching their vagina from a young age because they touch it and they go, that feels fucking mint. I love that. So like, of course they're gonna touch it. And there's, I think it's 5,000 nerve endings on your clitoris. Like vaginas are designed for pleasure. So like they're going to be drawn there. And I think releasing the shame around that as well and being like, it does feel good. And like you're definitely allowed to touch that. But when you're a little bit older and also you do those things in private. You don't do those things in front of people. That you can do that in private and there's nothing wrong with it, but it's just something for just you. It's just about you and it's just for you and that pleasure is just for you and things like that. So I mean the age that they start doing that or the age that, you know, is that I've got friends that have had like 5, 6 year old girls that are sitting there watching TV with their hand down their pants and they're like, get your hand out of your pants. And there's no explanation. It's just this knee-jerk reaction and then shame that follows for the child. Oh, that's wrong, don't touch that. Which then later on in life ends up with all of these women who are afraid to masturbate, who are ashamed of their vaginas, who are ashamed of their vulvas. So whole other issue to be spoken about, but there's it sets up this feeling of shame. So responding with like, that's normal. That's a normal thing, but it's for later on in life.
Okay.
It's for when you're older. It's for when you're older. It's for, yeah.
My daughter's been doing that where she opens her legs and is like, look at my vagina. What we're both just like automatic response of like, Ziggy, put that away. How should we
I'd
respond?
be like, that's a beautiful vagina, but that's just for you. Could you close your legs? Because that's just for you to look at. You can look at it in the mirror if you want. It is beautiful, but not in front of mum and dad or in front of anybody else. That's what I would say if I had a daughter.
What about her dad?
What is in what he should say.
Yeah. Can he be saying
Yeah.
that's a beautiful vagina?
I mean, maybe from mum to mum. I mean, dad,
Yeah,
maybe
yeah,
not.
yeah,
Maybe, yeah.
yeah.
Dad is a different bit of a different response. Dad would be like, that's your private, a bit more of a like woman to woman. It's like it's beautiful and celebrated, and this is what it's for, and all, you know, all those sorts of things. But as a man, I think that it should be a bit more of a protective response, because, you know, masculine protective, women nurturing. So masculine, the response I would say would be like, that's not appropriate. That's not safe. It's safe here in the home, but it's not a safe behavior for outside of the home or things like that, and focusing more on like safety and protection, and saying that's just for you. So you need to close your legs up. That's just for you. But just making sure that there's no like knee-jerk reaction and no shame that goes along with it, more explanation and safety and regulation that's delivering in that message. Because people do, we get so triggered, we get so like, oh.
I'm definitely going to have to write notes, because I find in the moment I just go freeze and I forget. But I was talking to a friend about having you on the show yesterday, and she was saying, "Oh, I just find like anytime I try to talk to my girls about it, they just get silly and like go bum bum and start making all like be all silly about it." What do we do
Yeah,
in that moment?
in that moment when they're being silly, just be like, I know, like, it's, you know, it feels silly and funny, and maybe it's a little bit uncomfortable, but it actually can be really serious. Depending again on the age, I've just said recently to my boys, it's actually a really serious thing. And because they keep making jokes about it. And I was like, it's okay for you to make jokes about it, maybe with your friends, but when we're out in the world and things like that, when adults are doing those sorts of things to children, it's actually illegal, and it's very, very wrong, and it can actually have a really big impact on those children's lives, and it can create trauma, which, you know, and those adults actually go to jail because it's illegal, and they're like, oh, and they've started to think about it in a different, but they're 7 and 9, as I said, so there's a bit more, there's another layer there that I can add on to that, whereas previously it was like, that's not appropriate, like, don't do that, that's your private parts. Don't, you know, what do we don't touch other people's private parts, and they don't touch ours. And yeah, just kind of reiterating that message to the point now where my boys are like, oh mom, you've said this a million times. But just reiterating that message, and if they're being silly, addressing it in a way that's like, hey, this is actually a really serious thing. It's not something that you should worry about, but it is something that you need to think about, and it's actually a serious thing. So like giving them some context. And people are afraid to give their children too much information, but the reality is confusion creates trauma. So clarification helps heal it.
Yeah, I was at the pub with my friends the other night, and I was because Ziggy was at my birth with Sage, and she's completely aware. And just the other day, because she still talks about Sage came out of mummy's vagina, and said yes, and Ziggy came out of mummy's vagina, and she's like, yep, Ziggy came out of mum's vagina in the living room, and Sage came out of mum's vagina in the bedroom, and so many people are like, oh my goodness, she knows about that. And I'm like, well, I don't want it to be an awkward conversation one day, but hey, by the way, this is just fucking how humans are made. Like I remember my mum
And
was
what's
so
wrong with
open.
it?
There's nothing wrong with it. I'm like, this is what we shouldn't we just be obvious about what's right in front of us? Like, we're so afraid to talk about the elephant in the room. My mum was so open about her menstrual cycle in front of me, and she'd put pads on or tampons on in front of me. And so when I became to get my period, I wasn't scared of having my period because I witnessed it. It was a part of the norm of the family. It wasn't like, Mom, I'm bleeding. It was like, no, I was more afraid of her knowing because she would tell everybody. But um, but like I just think that's so normal. And then she asked the other day, like, where did Sage in mummy's tummy? And then she asked another question. I was like, yeah, daddy put her there. Daddy put Sage in mummy's belly. And then you could see her brain. She's like, in mummy's bum? And I'm like, no, in mummy's belly. And then I'm like, oh god, this is like going too quickly on. And then it's like, where do we draw the line? We're not too. It's so
You
hard as
don't. If they're
parents.
if Yeah, if they're interested, tell them. Like, yeah, I'm the
Yeah,
same, and I have boys, and I'm like, they're like, they got code to come in the bathroom, and like, oh, don't come in. And like, why can't I come in? I'm like, well, you can come in, but there's blood. Like, I've got my period, and they're like, oh, okay, and they know what a period is, and they
yeah.
know that when the egg's not fertilized, it's released, and there's blood that comes out, and and they're like, does it hurt? And like, where do you put those things when the tampon thing when it comes out, and like they have questions, and I just tell them, because I want them when they're older and have girlfriends and partners and things like that to be like, cool, like
They're
to
gonna
not
be icked
be,
out
yeah.
about it. If you hide it from your kids, they're going to be icked out about it. And then I don't know, I just feel like when it comes to those teenage years, that it's yeah, I don't know. I just don't
It
know.
creates
It
shame.
feels
It
right.
creates shame around it, and then
Yeah.
yeah, then they learn that that thing is shameful. If they can feel when you're avoiding the conversation and when you're feeling uncomfortable, so then they feel uncomfortable, and then they just learn that that's this topic uncomfortable. Whereas if you're like, yeah, that's what your vagina is for. That's what your clitoris is for. This is what this is for. This is what sex is. This is how you make a baby. It's what people do when they're in love, and it feels really good. Like,
Mm.
but you're
You
not
can't
allowed to
always
do that
yeah,
until you're this old.
yeah, you just do what feels right, don't you? And sometimes in the moment, I'm like, oh my God, am I telling my 3-year-old way too much? Like, I tell her
No,
nearly everything. I explain to her everything as if I'm talking to someone. I'm like, oh, I don't want her to lose her childhood. Like, da 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 da. The mind
they do
noise
not
comes
lose it.
in.
No, they hear it, they hear parts of it, and then they're like, okay. And if they want to know more, they ask, and if they don't, they don't. But I think that over explaining is saving so many people, so many children. I think under explaining and avoiding subjects is so much more detrimental. Like, look where it's fucking got us so far in society.
100%. Oh my God. Everyone that knows me knows I'm such an over explaining. Ask me one question. It's like, do you have 20 minutes for an answer? And then I finish off and it's like, did I answer your question? It's like, nope. And it's like, ah, fuck.
I went on 20 tangents. Sorry.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Jess, now tell us, how are you going right now on social media? And let's have a quick chat about this daycare saga. What's your take on it?
Yeah. Social media is a funny one. Every time I post something that I think is me really being opinionated and controversial, no one will fucking write anything on it. And anytime I write something that I think is just something that people really need to hear and is quite beige, I'll get absolutely torn to shreds. It's a really hard place to be when you're working with trauma, especially because you're working with people who are easily triggered and things like that. So social media, it's been growing quite quickly, but it's definitely, I'm pivoting at the moment. I've done a lot of education and I'm pivoting more now towards how do we heal? How do we actually heal? Steps, tools, things like that is my next phase because I'm sick of sitting in the shit and I'm sick of like, awareness and education is one thing, but it's not really my thing. My thing is like, how do we heal it? How do we actually get better? How do we actually move on so that life can be epic after trauma? So that that's just a whole chapter that is closed and in the past. So that's kind of where social media has been at. I regularly receive hate, threats, all sorts of things. It's a wild world out there, but it's character building and it's the general public and it's just what you deal with as being a person on social media. Um, with everything that's going on at the moment with the childcare centres, I think with Joshua Brown and with these cases, horrific, disgusting, wrong, shouldn't have happened, but childcare centres aren't really the issue. People are like, okay, we need to look at these rules and this, and everyone's just like hyper focused on childcare. Should we drop our kids at childcare today? And everyone's like, all these reporters are like getting emotional on TV and things like that, but it's like, this is not the problem. The problem is so much bigger and no one's actually addressing that. No one's actually still going, the problem is like it's happening everywhere all the time. 1 in 6 men have sexual thoughts about children in Australia, in a study done. Like, not all of them are acting on it, granted, but it's a problem. It's a massive problem. And I think that the childcare, I hope that this childcare situation and case is going to bring to light a bigger issue, but I have fears that it won't. I have fears that it will change the childcare system and not actually address the real fucking issue, which is the fact that it's like a literal epidemic.
Wild. So if someone's listening right now, what can they do if something's coming up for them that, like you said, it may not be the full memory, it may be a feeling that something is right within their childhood?
I think, I'm about to release a program like for this. It's been a million years in the making, but called Triggered to Thriving, which is like taking people through like how to feel safe in your body, how to regulate before you even then look at your beliefs and then your traumas, and takes them kind of through the layers of like how to heal yourself essentially, which is probably going to be a really good starting point for a lot of people. And then booking in for therapy, because there are people, and this is why I created the online clinic. I've trained those women in how to take the edge of a memory or snippets of memories or just a feeling, an intuitive, like knowing that something's happened, or even no memory, but like suffering. Because the thing is, it hides, but it doesn't hide very well. Like, it leaks into your everyday life. And so when people come to me and say, oh, you know, like, I'm really afraid of, like, I get really uncomfortable, or I go into freeze when I have sex, or like they'll be like, oh yeah, and I'm like repulsed by this and I feel disgusting. They say these words and these things. Like, a good therapist will be able to pick up that there is something that is repressed. A good therapist will be able to pick up that you're suffering and struggling with something that you're unconsciously aware of. And that's what I've trained these women to do. So you don't necessarily need to have all of the past memories in childhood. If you're currently struggling, start with what you're currently struggling with, because that's going to give a hint to the past. It leaks out of you without you even knowing. Like, I have conversations with people all the time and I have to flick off my therapist brain because I'm like, trauma, limiting belief, limiting belief. So yeah, I think starting with just book a session. And again, with this kind of therapy, it's not like you have to even know what you want to talk about. You can just know that you're suffering and struggling, and you go in there and it's their job to unpack it. It's their job to uncover it and to help you to figure it all out. All you have to do is take the first step and make the booking and be brave, because out the other side of that, like, most people, even from the first session, have such a rapid shift once they do this kind of deep work that they're like, okay, I'm coming back. I'm bringing you the rest of my trauma. Or their brain's like, here you go. Here's all your repressed memory now that you know what to do with it. I think the first step is just doing fucking something, because we're just sitting there just being like, I should. I don't have any money. I don't have any time. So it's just getting out of your own head and just booking it, even though it terrifies you.
I just read a statistic yesterday that if you earn over $50,000 a year, you are 4% in the richest people in the world. And I think right now people are so in the victim of don't have enough money, but it's like, it all comes to choice. No, so many people aren't realizing that everything they spend their money on is a choice.
Yeah.
And it's looking at where you're spending your money and it doesn't align with your future and where you want to go. Oh, Gabor Mate. This is where I always come back to, is him. I love his books because have you read much of his work? He's a full doctor. So I
Yeah.
love that people love in the system people. Like, people love that they find safety in it. So I love referring to him, because if someone listening is like that, he's a doctor with a PhD, and he says when people come to him and say, I'm depressed, or I have ADHD, or I feel this way, first question he asks is, what's your relationship with your parents?
Yeah. It's
How
so
was
true.
your childhood? And
Yeah.
it's depression, and it leads to sickness. So now, and this is also a bit of a trigger, which I'm sorry, but I have to say it, is when people come out with they've got big chronic illnesses, my first thought is, have you dealt with your
Shit.
emotions?
Yeah. All your shit, all your trauma, all your emotions. Yeah. There's so many links between chronic illness and trauma. It's wild. Like,
It's coming
it's a
to
big
light.
one. Oh my
Jess,
gosh. Yeah.
where can people find you?
On social media, I am Jessica Aller, and my website is jessicaalla.com.au. They're the best two places. The online clinic is there. You can buy the children's book there. You can book in session with me or with one of the girls. Triggered Thriving will be there soon. Like, everything's there. All beautifully laid out for everybody, ready to go. I've recently updated my website, so it's very user friendly.
Thank you so much for not only taking the time to chat with me today, but also being brave enough to share your message whilst being criticized, whilst being called a liar, whilst I can't even imagine the email, the DMs in your inbox on social media being put in the limelight. People love to sit back and be keyboard warriors and be hatred, and without willing to go, where is this stemming from? Am I willing to look in the mirror? I'm being quite mean to somebody. How do I feel about myself? Like, let's all look in the mirror, do the inner work. It all comes back to us.
100%. I think one of my favorite quotes is, every judgment that you make about somebody else is a confession. It's a confession about yourself. So every judgment is a confession. So I've lived by that for a long time. If I find myself judging something, I'm like, oh, what is this confessing about me? I'm jealous. I want that. I should write that on my vision board, or, whatever it is. But every judgment is a confession. And so when we're judging people as liars, or we're judging people as drama queens, or, like, there's so many things that I've been called. When you're judging somebody as that, it's like, why? What's that confessing about you? Where could you be a bit more of a drama queen? Or maybe you are a drama queen as well, and their drama queen's triggering your drama queen. So Yeah, using those judgments as confessions.
I see it very much in the women to women too. It's women are women to worse, like older women to younger women are terrible for it. It's like so many
Yeah.
women are supporting the man and not supportive of the women.
Yeah, I think I've had it like maybe a small handful of women, but mine has actually been mostly men and saying like horrific things, like to the point of like some men saying things like on my childhood posts, like I would have raped you as a child. And like one of them said that I was so ugly that they felt sorry for my dad and like just insane things. Yeah. But yeah, a lot of me is for me personally, it's been a lot of men because I'm speaking up against men and about men, but not necessarily in a man hating way. I'm always very careful in the way that I do it, but you're just going to get those people regardless. But yeah, women can be a bit more nasty, a bit more calculated. I've had women that say that I'm a fraud and that they're going to report me, and then have gone onto like every platform that I have and just written across everything and just a lot more like intense. And it's just every single time it's just like it's a opportunity for me as well to go deeper in myself and be like, okay, like am I triggered or am I fine? Am I just going to let them go? Do I feel like I want to stand up for myself in this situation or just ignore it? Or do I feel like it actually is bothering me? And is there a fear that it's unlocking? Or, yeah, so just using it all as information. And, Brene Brown, if you're not in the arena getting your ass kicked, then you don't get an opinion or whatever. Abraham, whoever she got that quote from, it's like derived from somewhere else. But yeah, I think I have often been responding to people like, what are you doing to change the world? And that's my main response now is if you've got 200 followers and you're just writing shit on everybody's posts, like, and picking it apart, like, why don't you try creating something? Why don't you try making something, sharing something, building something yourself and see how hard it is?
Yeah, so true. Thank you so much. I know you need to run. Um, Thank you, everyone that's listening. Take a moment for yourself. Go out. Like I'm after every episode, take my shoes off, go out in the grass, sit, take some deep breaths. And if your inner child needs some loving today, take time for her. Take time for him because we
Yeah,
all we all need to.
absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.